isn't a forever relationship. This is what we're getting wrong in relationship. We think how our parents thought that, oh, this is our prized possession. And maybe a relationship isn't going to be forever, but can we have an intention? Today, you get all of me, and we are talking about love relationships, and we're talking about partnership. For those of you who have been following my journey over the last 7 years, probably 8 years, Ajit and I have been through all of it and more, and we've come out on the other side. And that's why people seek these extramarital affairs, because they're looking for freedom, they're looking for adventure, they're looking for spice. Are they seeking that in themselves? We have these subconscious expectations, or sometimes these expectations that are unmet. And if they are unmet in our mind, we feel defeated, or we feel hopeless, or we feel like, oh man, that didn't work out. How do you know? How do you know if you have a winner? How do you know if the relationship that you have right now is a forever relationship? In this episode today, we've had so many questions about what it takes to build a long-lasting, sustaining relationship that lasts. How is it that you can have a growth-oriented or growth-centered relationship? How do I know who is the one? And if they're not the one, and I am going through a breakup right now or a divorce, how do I deal with a breakup? Relationships take work, but it should not be dysfunctional. Our common goal is freedom in the way that we experience life. How do we do that? When Ajit and I got together 8 years ago, we had both been coming out of pretty long relationships. We both were married previously, and we knew that we wanted something different. We had both really prioritized growth and healing and working with all different kinds of, from shamans to relationship experts to therapists to coaches. I mean, the same amount of time that we developed ourselves in business as a leader, as a CEO of our life, we did exactly that individually. And this is important, individually, before we were getting together. And I mean, it's one of the reasons why and how we met. We met through a personal growth organization company called Mind Valley, and they put on this event. And before, it used to be 2 years, 2 times a year. And it was a 4-day personal growth event. And that's where we met. This was over now a decade ago. And when we met, it was just a hi, hello. But this was at a like-minded event where many people are going there for growth, for inspiration. It's in a completely different part of the world. And you are in a container, a safe container, where people are like-minded. They are all looking to be better versions of themselves. So perhaps you found this episode, maybe you were attracted to this episode from a friend, a colleague, maybe this was sent to you. And so maybe this is actually for you at this stage and era of your life. And so I knew I was ready for something different. I knew that the previous relationships that I had in the past were in many ways toxic. And I chose those relationships. I chose those partnerships because I needed to learn way much more in myself. Yet I was also in this time frame of life where I was just so ready to call my person in, my king in. And I was also reading a ton of different books. And I think that many times when you're also in the headiness or that masculine brain, or that brain of, I'm going to analyze everything and I think I know better because I've read so many different books and I've done all of the things, and then you still wonder why you can't attract or find somebody. Well, it's because we're in our head. And I'll tell you all the things that I have done that was probably not the best case or use of my time, which was, don't ever do an Excel spreadsheet with the people that you dated. Yes, I know, I confess, probably not the best use of my time, but I was a researcher, and that's my archetype. I'm a researcher archetype. I'm also a nurturer. I'm also a mama bear, and I love ferociously, and I love deep, intimate connection. And during this time of my life, I'm like, okay, let me just treat this as a research project. And I went on something along the lines of 50 to 60 dates in about 2 months, so 60 days. And this was and it was more so a challenge for me to get to know people and to be on the dating apps and to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And at that point in my life, I had only ever been introduced to somebody through friends or met them at either school situations. And I never really casually dated. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this as like an experiment, growth edge for me. And so, without any expectations, this is what I was doing. So, if this is you right now and you're like, yeah, I just got out of a relationship, I'm ready to go balls to the walls and go date again, perhaps maybe you can do this for yourself. Now, I'm not endorsing anything or anyone, and we've brought on so many different experts on the Brave Table, which I will link theirs in the show notes as well so that you can gain some perspective. But people have always asked, how did you find love after your loss, after your tumultuous divorce, your toxic relationship? And it is true, you can find love again. So I just want to say this, you can find love again. And it's really all about especially for type A, working women, ambitious women, a lot of times we pour ourselves into our careers. We pour ourselves into the work that we do because we find it so validating, because we are getting validation from that, our bosses. It becomes our dharma. It also becomes a way for escapism. We're escaping dealing with uncomfortable emotions and to sit in those uncomfortable feelings. And for a while after my divorce, I went into overcompensation. I went into these elements and modes of, okay, if I can't figure this out in my love life, I can definitely figure this out in my business life. And for those of you queens who are like, yeah, I know, I know. And the thing is because you've done a lot of the perhaps research around it, but have you actually embodied that information? Have you embodied it? Is it in your core cells? And someone might be watching this and saying, well, what does embodiment really mean? Actually, have you sat with the uncomfortable feelings? Have you sat instead of thinking and analyzing and writing all of these things down on why a certain relationship will not work? Instead, have you actually noticed, ooh, okay, when I think about this person, how does it make me feel? When I'm with that person, how do they make me feel? How are they treating me? How are they perhaps, how do I feel after they leave my presence? Am I feeling energized? Am I feeling drained? Is there butterflies in my stomach? To really have a sense and knowing, a deep knowing, an internal trust in your gut, not in your head. Because many times we have all of these analysis paralysis, and when we have so many options, like we do in an app, when we're just swiping all day, and we have that dopamine that's activating and it's activating, and we don't know when to shut it off and we don't know when to stop because we're still just swiping, swiping, swiping. Well, that's so much information overload. In the past, when you would just go to the library or the park or the coffee shop or the bar, even, you have maybe one or two or three or four choices. And then from there, you're like, okay, let's see how this works. Now we have so many variables, so many choices, endless amounts of scroll time and swipe time, so that we can numb ourselves, we can escape ourselves, we can avoid, and we can disassociate. So, all of these trauma responses that we have, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, from what's really happening in our nervous system because of our own ways of how we've learned to keep our body, our mind, and our central nervous system safe when things feel unsafe. So we go to those trauma responses. And then we start projecting our own thoughts and feelings to the closest people to us. And so then we are not really thinking that, oh, okay, I have to take personal responsibility in the yuckiness that I'm feeling right now, because I can't really, it's not safe to sit in my body. I haven't taught myself how to sit and feel these uncomfortable emotions of being single, of being not worthy, of what if I'm alone. And these are all responses that I've had at some point in my single life and days, and that I hear from a lot of you. I hear from a lot of you, professional, go getting, or just working women who are like, I really want to find someone. And it's just easy to go on social and numb everything, or see what so and so is doing, or see, oh, your neighbor across the street who seemingly has this amazing life. And how did they do it? And to say, okay, let's point the fingers back here. Let's look in the mirror and say, what am I uncomfortable with? What am I continuing to push under the rug? What am I continuing to gloss over? What am I continuing to escape and leave? Because it is so uncomfortable to go there. It is so uncomfortable to sit with the feelings or the rawness or the pain of rejection or the rawness of what if I will never find somebody, or the grief of what if I let go of somebody that I totally love and I will never find that love again. So first, in attracting or finding or even allowing yourself, you have to be able to sit with those uncomfortable feelings. And this was the journey upon which I was okay with. I was okay with being single for a while. I was like, I don't even think I'm going to have children. I don't even think, maybe that's not my path. And if this is you and you've been going on dates and maybe you're getting family pressure, or you think all of your friends are living a certain way and you're like, why isn't this happening for me? I feel like I'm a good catch. I don't know. Or maybe you are in your relationship and you're like, I don't know, things aren't going well. I don't know, that those dating apps look good. I feel like I need this sense of adventure, this sense of, as Esther Perel calls it, the sense of mystere, and the sense of knowing, ooh, do I still have it? And that's why people seek these extramarital affairs, because they're looking for freedom, they're looking for adventure, they're looking for spice. Are they seeking that in themselves? If you are those that are in a committed relationship, yet you're looking because you're looking to stray away because something is not being met. And so then we go into asking yourself, are you ready? So are you ready to be in a committed relationship? Are you ready? And if you are ready, these are the things that I would start with first. First is making that commitment to yourself, finding out your shadows of what are you not allowing yourself to sit with, and doing a deep dive, whether it is going away or taking the time and journaling out, who is that person for yourself? How do you want them to make you feel? Oftentimes we are so focused on the external. We're so focused on, I want them to be X amount of height. I want them to make this much money. I want them to be successful, wealthy, hot. And then when we get those things, we realize we're like, oh, okay, well, this person is narcissistic. This person does not have any time for me. And this person is only in their orbit. And then we get defeated. And then we have these certain expectations that they're not being met. What if we just go back to, and this is kind of bringing me to how I attracted Ajit. We were friends. We were friends for a really long time. And it was me who was blindsided because of my own projections, my own belief systems, my own past stories, previous stories that I had in my mind. And it was only me that could uncover it. You know that saying where they might be just right under your nose? He was right under my nose. I was writing my book in Kuala Lumpur. We had got reintroduced. We were both speaking at similar events, and it was proximity. We were close. I was also in a different part of the world, so my environment was completely changed. And if any of you are readers of my, best-selling book, That Suck Now What, you'll know that in building your bounce factor, we first have to make peace with our past. We have to make peace with our upbringing. What were we taught about relationship? What were we taught about our own ideals of what a marriage looks like. Many times we get those ideals from our family. Many times we get those ideals from our parents, from our caregivers, the ones who were constantly around us. So aunts, uncles, the people that raised you, to say, how are their relationships? How did they treat each other? So then we get a subconscious imprint for ourselves. So if you notice from that tuck now what, and in building your bounce factor, your ability to bounce back after stressful, sucky breakups, hardships, moments, and to be able to bounce back, if not higher than before, and find that person in your life, well, we have to stop doing what we were doing. And that means making peace with the past, making peace with your upbringing, making peace with some of those stories, the dialogues, the ideas that were somehow passed down in your lineage to you. And now you coming to this episode, you have a chance to break free from that. You have a chance to sever that. You have a chance to heal that. You have a chance to take a different path than what was disposed to you or exposed to you or passed down to you from your parents. And now some people have said, well, my biggest fear is turning out to be like my parents. My biggest fear is to have a loveless relationship like them. My biggest fear is to walk around eggshells like they did. My biggest fear is to be a single mom. My biggest fear is fill in the blank. But a lot of times it's this past programming that we had. For the longest time, I had to reframe this. My biggest fear is losing again, because I lost several members of my family. I lost a marriage that I thought was going to be a great marriage. But in that loss, I had to find myself. In that loss, I had to humbly allow myself to break down and shatter and let go in order to fully rebuild life and the fruits of who I was becoming again. And in finding myself again, I could find the younger version of Neeta and feel compassion for her and feel compassion for even all of her exes that she'd ever dated. Wow, I chose you for a reason. I chose you to teach me more about myself. I chose you to teach me more about coming back to my center. I chose you to teach me more about loving myself 100%. I chose you to teach me about not caring about what other people think. So you get to choose, and I hope you're writing this down and I hope you're taking notes. You get to choose how, and even if you're married, even if you are in a 5-year, 10-year, 15-year, 20-year, 25-year relationship and you feel like this is the end of the road, or you feel like you can't spark, it starts with us first. So first, it's making peace with the past. We're not going to go back in the past. We get to reframe the story today. Today, we get to reframe the story. What's the story that you are telling yourself today? I am lovable. I am worthy of love. I'm worthy of a spicy, juicy, adventurous, sensual, ecstatic love that's greater and beyond me because I deserve it. And all right, so we get past that first piece, but then we change our environment. So like I said, so changing your environment, inviting that good stress, you might say, "Ooh, I'm not going to just leave my house." Well, no, maybe you can plan a date night in a different part of the city. Maybe you can go for a staycation and stay downtown at a hotel. This is what Ajit and I have now done for the last, now my daughter just turned 3, but we've been doing this on Thursdays. And sometimes it's 2 Thursdays a month, sometimes it's 3 Thursdays a month, but we have a little staycation and we stay at a hotel downtown. And sometimes it's just creating a picnic or just getting out of the same routine and the same mundane things that you usually do and spice it up a bit. Take turns planning. And I'll share more of this as we go along. Yet for me, in able to say yes to Ajit, it was going to a completely different part of the world and reducing my faculties and my inhibitions of the control that I have in my mind of an ideal that I had of how something should fall into place, right? We have these subconscious expectations, or sometimes these expectations that are unmet. And if they are unmet in our mind, then we feel defeated or we feel hopeless or we feel like, oh man, that didn't work out. And then we beat ourselves up and then we go down our spiral and our rabbit hole. Yet people come to us in the form of angels, and At that time of my life, I had so many amazing, incredible men that were showing up as stewards, that were showing up as guides, that were showing up as really close friends who were mirrors to me. And it was platonic relationships, which were so beautiful, which is why I'm a big proponent of having relationships that are the opposite sex, even when you are married, because you need that. And it is so great. And I know a lot of things come up around jealousy, and we'll get into that later on in this episode. And I know that the biggest thing that you can do is, especially in if you are lucky enough and blessed to have one or two friends of the opposite sex. And I did that. I had many of that to actually be an ideal of, all right, this is what that could look like when a relationship is in flow, when there is no friction. And the only friction was my own fears of losing again, my own fears of loss, of breakup, of divorce, of, all right, this is not going to go my way. And I had to surrender to that. And once I said, you know what, I'm okay, and I'm going to be unattached. I'm going to be unattached to the outcome. And if it works, it works. If not, it's totally fine. I'm just going to be in the space of play. And what can I learn about myself in the space of play? And that is it. And from there, the rest is history. Because from that place, it was constant play. It was not asking, hey, do you want to have kids? Hey, are you ready for a relationship? Hey, are you ready for long term? And it killed me every single time because I didn't know where I was going to live. Everything was kind of up in the air. And some of you are like, oh my gosh, how could you live in that much uncertainty when you were living all over the world and you didn't even know what was to come next? It was also around the time when my other world, I had just sold my dental practice. So I was really unhinged. I had a ton of freedom, probably too much freedom. Freedom in where I was going to live, freedom in my work life, freedom in what I was going to be doing next, freedom in love. It was a lot of freedom, and I needed to have structure. My Vata energy was like, woo, woo. It was like, it was roaming the ether. And it was, I needed some grounding. And once I said, okay, I'm not going to be attached. The only thing I had was one of my first books that I was writing at that time. And actually it was set for publishing. And I said, okay, I'm going to commit myself to a few of the states that I was doing interviews and things like that. This was for my first book, Emotional Grit. And I said, okay, I'm going to be in New York. I'm going to be in these places, and let's see if we can tango. And Ajit said yes, because he was also in this space of travel and exploration. And so we both had aligned visions and missions. And so getting into this section, how do you know? How do you know if you have a winner? How do you know if you have a winner? How do you know if the relationship that you have right now is a forever relationship? Well, I know one thing's for sure. And with so many of the experts we've had on, 230 episodes, what I've learned from so many of these amazing experts, who some of them I like to call my dear friends, is there isn't a forever relationship. Ooh, there is not a forever relationship. We learned this from Mark Groves and Kylie, which we'll link their episode in the show notes. They talk about liberated love. We've learned a lot from them. And I've known Mark as a personal friend for 10 years plus. And it's something that it's so true. We think that, oh, this is our prized possession. And this is what we're getting wrong in relationship. We think, oh, we think how our parents thought. And maybe relationship isn't going to be forever. But can we have an intention? Can we have an intention? And that was something that Ajit and I did early on. I don't know what is forever, because what I've learned, even in my processing and experience of tremendous loss, we can't be attached to life. As the Buddha says, impermanence, and teaches impermanence. What we have tomorrow, or what we have today, we might not have tomorrow. So let's be present, and let's really savor it, and let's really allow ourselves to really enjoy and bear the fruits of that. And that's what's so special, it may not be tomorrow, but can we enjoy it and have fun and experience that for today? And that's why you'll feel like I am so passionate about connection and I'm so passionate about celebrating life. And because there's so many years where I just couldn't. So many years where the universe was testing me, testing in hospital visits, in relationships, in really dark relationships, to say, actually, you've arrived and you can create joy even in some dark moments. And so even if you are contemplating, is this relationship the one? Is this relationship a forever relationship? How do I know? The thing is there's no such thing as a forever relationship. Maybe past versions of your relationship need to die. Ding, 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 ding. Past versions of your relationship need to die out, to rebirth, to birth new iterations of your relationship. Ajit and I, in the past, we got together really fast. And so we are celebrating our 7 years together. And people have asked, what have you done differently? Because you started to have a family right away. And we started to have not only family right away, but we started multiple different businesses. We've moved several different times, different places cross country, globally. We've lived around the world. And by no means we are relationship experts, but the thing that we are committed to is we are committed to a solid vision. Like we've shared in the episode of he and I recently on the Brave Table, which we'll also link in the show notes. And the biggest thing for us is to have and be okay with letting parts of our relationship die off to grow into new ones. And you can say, well, how do you even do that? Well, here's how we do it. We have our own intention setting. You might have an intention setting practice or intentions for the new year. Every year you make New Year's intentions or you have a new word. We have our 6-month intention check-ins every 6 months. This used to be every quarter. And now, if we're lucky, we have it every 6 months. And we have one, we actually are just having one that's coming up pretty soon because we are, at the time of this recording, it's midway through the year. And then we usually have one at the end of the year. And this has been great because it really solidifies, all right, where are we at? Checking in, what each other needs, checking in, what is coming up in this phase of our relationship. And I will share, and I shared this on the episode with him as well, we had a really rocky few years when we moved from LA to Austin. We were remodeling a house. No, try not to do that with a partner. And if you do, that is one of the biggest spiritual growth practices that you can do, because it brings up all of the unearthing and the programming and the subconscious programming, because you're dealing with contractors and money and your space and your sacred space, and also your children who are being born at the same time. And we had so many different things happening that we really needed to take a closer look. And boy, that was the fire. And we were in the fire. And it was a lot of blaming. It was a lot of not taking personal responsibility, where we were really met with uncomfortable discussions and patience and allowing and surrendering to the heat and seeing what that heat would turn into if we were allowing it to turn into something magical. And it took some time. Oh, it took some time. And so, how do you know if you have a winner? So, the first thing is, are you both committed to something higher than yourselves? What is your individual dharma and your life's purpose, your own truth? Do you have an individual dharma, and do you have a united vision? What is your vision of your relationship that you want to have together? You have to have an individual one, and you have to have a vision for yourself. And you're thinking, well, I've never even thought of that. Well, this is great. Maybe this is something that you can practice. The second thing, how to know if you have a winner, is, are they coming from a place of curiosity, or is everything a dysfunctional discussion where you are avoiding each other for a week, not talking to each other. You blow up, combust, and you don't have a way of repairing and reconciling. You think the worst of each other. These are red flags. Winners in relationship are like, okay, you see the differences. You can agree to disagree. You maybe have a safe word when things are getting heated. You have carved out time, if not every 6 months, if not every month, perhaps once a year, at the very, very least, once a year, to realign and see where your values are, to check in and to see how are we supporting each other in life, in business, in career, in finances, with children. Do we want to have children? There was a time where Ajit and I, were very much on different levels. He didn't want to get married, and I was like, well, if I'm going into a long-term relationship, I really would love to. I'm looking for my king. And then when I heard, when he had shared that he doesn't feel like he's ready for it, that was something for me to process and say, okay, you know what? This is where we're at. And then slowly and steadily, he came around to it and he had his own processing for it. The same thing with children. That was a very big one. I knew at this season and stage of my life, I wanted. There was a time where I didn't want. And when I met him, I instantly knew. Ladies, you kind of know when that kind of happens. Well, guess what? He really wasn't on the same page for that. He wasn't. It was a scary thing. It was huge. It was big. He had a lot of insecurities about himself and where he was at in life. And I know now from having all of these experts on the podcast, many times as men, they have to feel that they are at a certain echelon in life. They want to feel that they can provide for their family. And many times they may not ever feel that, but they have to come to it for themselves. And you can imagine this was such a huge point of contention because I'm like, okay, I'm in my late 30s. I don't want to subscribe to all of the things that happen when you're trying to get pregnant in your mid to late 30s. And I just knew that, again, it was another invitation to trust and not push, but we were going to dance in the uncomfort of these super uncomfortable emotions. And if you are watching this or listening to this as a female, you totally can resonate with, OMG, how did you navigate through that? Let me tell you, it was tough. And there is no pushing, none of that. It's all about really kind of getting to the root and really seeking to understand. So this is, again, how do you know if you have a winner? These were easily non-negotiables for me that I could have said, all right, this is not my person. This is not my person. They're not ready for long-term commitment and they don't even want to have children. And nor was I one of those that was like, oh, let me see if I could change their mind. I was not. I was committed to this idea of I'm just going to have fun and play at this point. And I gave myself a year. And we were traveling and we were going in different parts of the world. And, that was a very beautiful time in our life where I know a lot of times we might not have that, but this was the experience of just letting go. So, is it values aligned? Do you have common values, common shared mission? You don't have to have the same output. Ajit and I are extremely very different. And do you want to carve time out for each other? It should be easy and fun. And yes, relationships take work, but it should not be dysfunctional. It shouldn't be that you're constantly jabbing one at another and not knowing how to fight properly. Is there a common goal for yourselves? I know for Ajit and I, our common goal was freedom in the way that we experience life. And so that has been huge. Well, what did we decide and realize in our relationship is how to communicate. So this is the next section that I want to get into, is really how to communicate in your relationships. And we've had to learn so much about each other. And again, I'm a researcher archetype. I brought on experts who don't agree with this philosophy, but I know that for us, it has worked really, really well. And some of our secret sauce has been to over communicate. Now, in the beginning, Ajit and I had very different communication styles because I'm a bold, um, outspoken, super bluntly honest queen from Chicago, the city. And he is from the most royal small town of Jaipur, Rajasthan, where people are soft spoken. They really do prep before they speak. And many times, women even speak even an octave lower in where he grew up and how he grew up and in the home that he grew up in. And so you can imagine a lot of how I come across would be experienced as combative or bold or bulldozing, where I am this Punjabi, fiery Filipina and loud and boisterous and loving to share and talk and so passionate self. And, where he comes from a family that has so much reverence for quiet and reserved and only speak when you have a profound idea or if you have, it's little is more and you have to read between the lines, and it couldn't be more opposite styles. And so in the beginning, did we bump heads? 1000%. But did we still have a shared common goal? Our common goal was we were both so committed to understanding the way each other worked. And yes, because we have growth orientation within the way we live our lives, that was another big aha moment. So, how did we navigate difficult conversations? Well, I actually have a course for having brave conversations in your relationships. I will link that also in the show notes here, because we have to understand and know that your partner is just coming from a place of love, right? And you have to know what their triggers are. If they are being triggered, what parts of themselves. Mark Wolin and Maureen Saliné, who talks about family constellations and the most incredible book, It Didn't Start With You, talks about also internal family systems, IFS work, Robert Schwartz's work, where there are parts of ourself that come up to protect parts of ourself that didn't feel safe at different stages of our life. So if I had shared something and maybe it triggered a younger version of himself, he will contract. He will close up, he will close up, he will contract, and he will put his armor up to defend. And same thing with myself. If he would say something in a way that felt that it was threatening to me feeling safe, because the street girl of Chicago was trying to defend herself as an orphan, 19-year-old trying to do everything for her family, her big armor would come on as well. So you can imagine armor can't fight with armor. Love can only respond with love. And to be able to open and allow, and there's got to be one in the relationship. And you're like, how do we do that? Well, that's a much longer conversation, but you have to know how to navigate difficult conversations. You have to be able to build the third thing here is a solid communication routine. If knowing your attachment styles, okay, this is huge because next I want to talk about how to fight in a relationship. If you are, and you might think, oh, my parents weren't a secure attached relationship, but they were miserable. They never talked to each other. They shoved everything under a rug. They would have a fight. They wouldn't talk for a few days. Or in my case, when my parents fought, they fought loud and proud. It was not the best when they had their fighting styles because it was big, it was loud, and they loved passionately and fiercely, but you knew that there was this it was a big thing, and there was shouting and yelling, right? So neither of these are ways to have a reconciliation and repair. And I'm not saying neither of those are good or bad. It's just Ajit and I wanted to have something different for our relationship. And we were committed to understanding and seeing what other possibilities are out there. And if you are one of those that grew up in either of those dynamics, that you're like, I don't want to pass this down to my next relationship, or I know I had certain things in my past relationships that I don't want to bring in. Well, who do you need to be in order to have that? And yes, Are there going to be times where you'll still revert back to your 10-year-old self or your 15-year-old self or your 8-year-old self? Absolutely. Absolutely. But do you have your tools now to get yourself in a grounded, centered place where it's not taking you back to a spiral, that you can actually allow yourself to calm, that you can actually find your center, and that you can be transparent, you can be honest, you can say, hey, this thing's been on my mind. You can come from a place of love. You can say, hey, I don't want to ruffle any feathers, but I notice that anytime I bring something up, you close down. Is this true, or this is just how I'm experiencing you? Again, understanding how each other communicates is huge, but what's even greater is how you fight. This is big. How do you fight in your relationship? Now, one is understanding our attachment styles. Are we avoidant in conflict? Do we avoid? What's our trauma response? Do we fawn? Do we acquiesce? Do we fight? Are we combative? Again, attachment styles, right? Fight or flight, which means fighting, or flighting, which means avoidant, or you've got to fight and you've got to get to the bottom of it before you have a safe word, or you fawn, okay, which means you're like a deer in a headlights and you don't know what to say. And so you're like, you know what, it's all my fault. And you take full personal responsibility, even though you know it's not fully your personal responsibility, and you acquiesce to the other person's needs and desires because you want to be liked and you don't want to rock the boat. That's fawning. And knowing if this is attached to any previous unhealed trauma, like you're playing out the dynamic between you and your mom, you're playing out the dynamic between you and your dad, who you only wanted love and appreciation from, or your caregiver, your caretaker when you were younger. You want to be able to seek to understand. And there's a lot of this that come up in relationship, and really truly understanding how we fight, what happens in our dynamic, because sometimes you might need a break. One is avoidant. One might be anxiously attached. So if you are dating an anxiously attached person and you're avoidant, or maybe both of you are avoidant, then you're going to have a lot of things under a rug, and you'll only address it when it blows up. So really understanding where these things are coming from, knowing if you are feminine or masculine, meaning one person is going to be othering and focusing on the other. That's a feminine energy. They will be more soft. They will be the ones to lay back, and they will be more fun and spontaneous and not selfing. The masculine is more about the self and agendas and ideas and deadlines and how's this going to affect me. Not that it's in a bad way. It's just you have one that's othering and one that is in focusing their needs on others, right? And then you'll have one that is more about the self, more about the structure and the deadlines, and how can we both soften and integrate that with one another, and seeing that it's not coming from a place of disaster or dysfunction, but it's also understanding. So again, I say this: seek to understand, then be understood. We have that famous proverb. Coming from a place of curiosity and really understanding and knowing what we needed when we were younger. So being able to dive into perhaps parts work, internal family systems, relational therapy. These are some of the ones that we've used. Us is another great work by Terrence Real and Terry Real. We've found that his work has really been around building a pillar. We have our individual pillars, but building a pillar for us to have that deep understanding. And so these are all of the things that I think have contributed to us having a really beautiful relationship at this stage, being able to focus in on ourselves. And mind you, we've had our fires. We've had kind of coming through the other side. We've had our differences. We've had our coming from immigrant backgrounds, our families wanting to get involved. And it's just been so beautiful for us to retain our sovereignty, especially when we have so much reverence to our family backgrounds and our cultural upbringings. And also, we have that sovereignty within ourselves. So, the last thing that I want to leave you all with is, do you have healthy balance in your relationship? And what do I mean by balance? Well, Ajit and I have made a priority that, yes, we are growing together, but we know that he and I are very, very different people. I love to travel, and we even travel differently. You might say, well, he likes to travel too. Well, yeah, it's different. And I love to travel with my girlfriends. I love to take now the kids out solo in different mom trips. And just because there are things that Ajit and I like to do, and I'm more spontaneous, he's more like structure and planned when he is traveling. I have a lot of structure and planning in my life. So when I'm traveling, I just like to have this open space. And so some of the questions to think about is, do you have time outside of your relationship? And if you cannot think of one other person or a friend or friends or community outside of your relationship, that is huge to, in our opinion, thriving in relationship, because you need to have that sense of perspective. And you're like, oh, well, this is the honeymoon phase and I love and I only want to be around him and or them or whatever. Well, do you have different interests outside of them? There was something I've always wanted Ajit to be like loving, which was about yoga. And I'm like, I always wanted him to love yoga as much as I do. And he hates it. He hates it. He's tried. He's had his own coaches with yoga. He just does not like yoga, just does not like it. And so I planned date nights just to do yoga, thinking that he'd love it. Hates every single time. And he's like, why do you always do this? I'm going to do this because I love you, but I really don't like it. And so, all right, he'd rather like a walk or a hike in the park. All right, great. We have different interests. Now, he now has a hiking buddy or two that he goes with. Some of them are of the opposite sex. I'm totally okay with that. Totally okay with that. We have to be okay with allowing our significant others to have their own relationships, because that's what makes them whole too. The second or the third thing that I want to ask is, do you penalize one another for not liking similar activities? I used to do this with Ajit. I'm like, why do you not like yoga? Like, what? Are you kidding me? It's such a big value for me. But what it was is wellness, well being, movement. And so when we found what movement lights him up, then it's like, okay, let's do more of that. And the final question that I have is, do you allow room for individual growth together and individually for their own freedom and exploration? Because the person that you started dating maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago is hopefully, maybe 6 months ago, not the same person that you're dating today. Give them a chance to show you who they are today. Give them a chance to show you who they want to become today, and accept them for it and cheerlead them on for it and allow them to expand for it and see what you can do in order to make that happen for them, to be a champion for their own individual growth and their own individual freedom, because that's what brings the polarity back. Finally, getting into polarity, which is our final thing that I wanted to end with today. You need to have the polarity. If things are too good, too easy, too vanilla, then it's just not going to work in the long run. As Esther Perel says, we need to have that spice and mystere, and that's where the sensuality comes in. And are you spicing things up not only in the bedroom, but in your day-to-day, allowing yourself to go back to flirting, to dating one another? I still say I'm just constantly dating my partner. And I know he says the same about me. And so that's how I wanted to just bring all of these amazing topics for you to divulge, dive into. I hope you got a lot of value out of this. Let me know what you think by tagging us on The Brave Table, Neeta Bhushan. If you're watching this on YouTube, Comment below on YouTube. I'd love to know, what aspects have you tried? Have you not tried? What could we add to our growing list? Again, we are constant learners. We don't know everything, and we are guinea pigs ourselves. So we are constantly trying these things. Let me know if this has helped you in many ways. And thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time on the Break Table.